Connecting to cloud server.
All right, Kelly, if you'll start letting people in.
I will do it. Here they come.
Hello and welcome to those of you who are entering the room. We're looking forward to our webinar today, beginning in just a minute or two before we get everybody in. So please be patient with us as we work through that. And we have two functions today. We have our chat function that you can enter kind of any personal bits that you might be willing to share, where you're from, maybe your role at the university. Certainly not required to tell us that, but curiosity sometimes gets the better of me, and I wonder who is here. Um, so that's always nice to know. We'll introduce ourselves before we get started in the same kind of way. And then I'll run through some directions as to how we will go through our live webinar today. So let's just take one more minute before we get started, make sure people who are in the waiting room are in. And then again, I will go through some simple instructions for our webinar and get started. So thanks to those of you that are here currently, and it is 2 minutes after. So this is meeting is being recorded, and we will have this for you to view later and to share with anyone that you think might be able to benefit from it. So here is our introductory slide. We have our fireside chat. As you can see, we're all by the fire. We're by the campfire, and it may be a little too warm where you are, or not late enough in the day for a campfire. But we're going to try to make this a slightly informal webinar rather than kind of the info-driven webinars that we often give. So we'd like this to be a little more conversational. And as you can see, we're going to be talking about feasibility as well as the IRB and the role of the IRB chair, Dr. Marin, who is our guest today. So without any further ado, then we're going to get started. If you could just bear with me for a few minutes. I'm going to give some basic information. We're recording this, so it'll be available on our webpage. We also have a YouTube channel. If you've not seen either of those, you can go to our website and find that information. We're also going to be keeping track of the question and answer. So feel free, again, to enter into the chat where you're from, what your role is, any other information you're willing to share. And then in the Q&A function, we'll ask that that's where you enter your questions, and we will hopefully be able to attend to those questions either through Dr. Tribble, who I'll introduce in a moment, typing in answers, or answering live, depending on the type of question and how much time we have. So we'll have that Q&A available on our webinars webpage as well. So in a few days, when you go to that webinars page, you'll find our recording and you'll find the PowerPoint that we're using, and you'll also find the question and answer document. So we won't be sending those out to attendees, but they will be available for you on our website. So very briefly, the IRB, right, is a committee that's sort of designated by federal policy. And if you want to read about the common rule, you can link to that from here. So we're kind of an independent board. While we are obviously part of NU, our charge comes from the federal government. We're not a committee that provides guidance, whether that be programmatic or academic or methodological, unless, of course, that method that you're choosing presents risk. So, for the students in the room, sometimes there's some confusion about what the purpose of the IRB is. So we want to make sure that everybody understands that our role is not advisory regarding the quality of, your research, but more the protection of human subjects. So that's going to be a key focus for us in our presentation. We have a wonderful website that you can link to. from these hyperlinks within this slide deck. You probably have to go to the website to actually get the slide deck, so you'll already be there. But there are a lot of other important resources and services available to people, to researchers that are affiliated with NU as any type of NU employee. So we have graduate students, undergraduate students, faculty, staff, administrators that can use our application system, can do research with IRB approval. For the students in the room, we have this note here that you can be using our resources and services at any time in your program. You don't have to wait until you're in the quote unquote IRB class. You can come and start working with us as soon as you begin your program. And for dissertation students, you'll see that we have some specific course numbers that you don't have to be in order to come to us. So we just want to make sure that people know that we're open to staff, administrators, faculty, and students of all kinds, no matter where they're in their program, to engage in our resources and use our services. So our webinar preview, is sort of our contents here. We're going to be discussing something some of you may have never heard of before, which is the HRPP, the Human Research Protection Program. And we're also going to be then distinguishing that from the IRB to give you an idea of what the IRB is, the role that it plays, the role of the chair, Dr. Marin, who's here today, and then we're going to talk about several feasibility issues, kind of things that can get in the way of a successful research project. So, before we get started, I just want to introduce myself and our group here from the IRB /HRPP. My name's Chad Becker. I'm an education analyst, and I work as an HRPP staff member, certainly with a focus on the activities of the IRB. I'm in Terre Haute, Indiana. I'm originally from Buffalo, New York, and I've been at NCU/NU for a handful of years, from before the transition through till now. So I'd like to introduce I'm the host of our session. I'd like to introduce our guest panelist, who is Dr. Joseph Marin, who's our IRB chair. So I'm going to hand the mic over to you for a second, Dr. Marin, and you can introduce yourself, let people know where you're calling in from, kind of thing.
Thank you, Chad. As Chad said, I'm Dr. Joe Marin, and I reside in Sanford College of Education for my full-time position. I'm a professor and program director of higher education administration and the doctoral program in organizational innovation. So my primary work is centered around thesis, dissertations, and research work, and it's been my privilege to be the IRB chair for quite a few years now. And as Chad said, we hope today that we'll be able to clear away if there's any fuzziness about roles, what we do, the difference between HRPP and the board. And then, as Chad's indicating, we'll finish up with some feasibility related topics. So welcome to you all, and thank you very much for taking time out of your day to attend this.
I second that, and thank you, Dr. Marin, for being available for this conversation. I think it will be very informative. And we have Dr. Kelly Tribble with us, who is a IRB educational analyst. Dr. Tribble, you'd like to introduce yourself as well.
Hey everyone. Yep, I'm Kelly Tribble, originally from the East Coast in the Carolinas, but now I live in Texas, and it's hot here today. So sorry if I'm sweating. But anyway, we're glad to be here. I'm an education specialist here. I do weekly presentations, so if you've come to any of my presentations, I appreciate it. If you'd like to know more about our processes and how to get your application approved more quickly, perhaps, you're welcome to attend any of my presentations as well. So thanks I'm happy to be a part of this.
And Dr. Tribble also attends to our office hours, which can be very useful. And
Yep.
we appreciate that work that Dr. Tribble does. So, all right, we're going to move forward again. Please, in the chat, if you want to kind of introduce yourself, feel free. We always like to read those later. And I think people like to see where other folks are from. We're going to use that Q&A function again, remember, for any questions. So you may not have too many questions as we move through these first informational slides. I apologize. I'm going to dominate here for a few minutes, and then we will turn over to kind of a more informal discussion about some important topics with Dr. Marin, our IRB chair. So, what is the HRPP? It's the Human Research Protection Program. It's more of an overarching system that almost all institutions that have IRBs have as well, and the IRB fits under the umbrella. So IRB is a part of a human research protection program, and there's other parts. We won't bore you too much with what those other parts are, but you can see them here. And it includes more than just, your application and approving applications. So take a look at that list, give you a sense of some of the other components that an ethical research office, takes under their wing at an institution like a university or other types of institutions like hospitals and other clinical settings. So, what is the IRB then? Well, it's a committee that's part of the HRPP, and it's responsible for the ethical review of human subjects research. Now we're narrowing a little bit, right? So now we're talking about who looks at your research proposal slash application, and who determines whether or not it's ethical and whether or not it meets the federal standards of human subjects research. We look for things like risk and any protections that can be in place. We look for ensuring that people are informed and that they give their consent to be in the study, and other things like compliance with research and participant welfare. So, those are some of the things that we look at. And you may be saying to yourself, well, my research doesn't really, it isn't risky, and there isn't any welfare issues. But we still need to make sure that you're compliant with the regulations, getting informed consent. And so that's why every research study that involves human research subjects, and even those that involve archival data but are done at national through the auspices of your position, need to come through the IRB. There's a cloudiness, I think, as we mentioned earlier, between HRPP and IRB. Sometimes people will use them interchangeably. Just remember that the HRP is the overall program, the IRB is the ethical board within that system. And it's just one component of a larger program that spans the entire institution, both latitudinally and longitudinally. So we have the IRB focus is on reviewing studies, right? And then the HRPP is about the broader infrastructure and culture of human subjects research protections at the institution. The distinction between who works within our office and what they do is also kind of an interesting thing that we sometimes get questions about. So it's not just one person, it's a partnership between the staff of the HRPP and the IRB members constituted from across the university. So our HRPP office staff includes directors, analysts, and educational analysts like Dr. Tribble and I. And the IRB is made up of members from across the institution, which involves faculty, uh, can involve staff, and can involve administrators as well. We'll talk about that even more as we get into the details of what Dr. Marin does. But each group has its own responsibilities, as you can see. So the role of the staff is to do these types of elements, similar to the role of the office. So I won't go through this in too much detail, but you can see that the role of the staff slightly differs from say reviewing, documents. I'm sorry, the role of the staff conducting pre-reviews, identifying misinformation, reviewing and approving documents. And they will review minimal risk research. And that is most of what we see that comes through our application system is minimal risk research. So not every study goes to the full board, and I apologize. I think that's an important moment in this presentation for people to realize is that the full board is there when it's needed. The HRPP staff often handles most of the work, gets right into the review scenario and reviewed quickly. Those studies that are, quote, greater than minimal risk, what we call GTMR, you can see on the middle of this slide, those are the ones that go to the full board. And when we see those, it's likely because of some of the reasons we're going to talk about here in the next few minutes. When that happens, it does elongate the process and more people are brought in, more experts are brought in to help us determine what it is that we're looking at. So this is what we're looking for. Minimal risk is easier to get through. Greater than minimal risk requires the full board to take a look at it. So staff and other trained employees can review minimal risk studies, but the full board needs to be brought in when there's a greater than minimal risk. And you can see some of those risks there. We'll be talking about those in a few minutes as well. I think I'm almost done with my intro slides here. We're going to get to Dr. Joe in just a moment. But the educational and consultative role here is certainly kind of what we're doing partly right now, which is to hold webinars, the classes that Dr. Tribble had mentioned, the asynchronous resources, the office hours, all of the things on our website. The reason for those is here on our bulleted points. So taking a look at those, some of it is reiterated and some of it there is just helping you understand the role that we play. All right, so moving forward then, what we're going to do, and I'll stop and ask, I haven't been monitoring, but Dr. Tribble, how are we doing? Any questions so far?
Nope, not any at all. People have been introducing themselves into the
That's great.
chat, but that's it.
So again, just if you're coming in, I know we're 17 minutes in already, but I did just see someone that came in. So if you want to introduce yourself in the chat, please do. And then if you have any questions, please use the Q&A. And you may have questions as we go through this part, since the information isn't so obvious on the page or as basic as what I was just presenting. So here's where we're going to move into a more conversational component of our presentation, more of a chat. And we're going to pull from the knowledge of our longtime chair, Dr. Joseph Marin. So each of these slides will kind of have an intro and a basic phrase, and then we will talk about what that phrase means. You can ask questions. We will do our best to answer those questions live, and we will certainly answer questions that are not answered but remain in the Q&A. I think if we have the opportunity to come off of mute, which I'm not sure we'll have the time to do yet, but if we do, uh, based on the pacing of these next few slides, please also then put a phrase in the Q&A so that I can make sure to answer that for everybody that may look at the Q&A later. So we'll talk about that if we get any of those live questions. But for now, let's jump in to our fireside chat with Dr. Joe Marin. And we're very much looking forward to gaining from Dr. Marin's experience, hearing his anecdotal experience, kind of stories that help us frame what we do here and what is good for not only primary investigators that are students, but also for everyone at the university who might want to engage in research. So, Dr. Marin, we're going to talk about the role of the full board, the IRB full board, which of course is an awkward thing to say because it's the Institutional Review Board full board. And so we often repeat board sometimes, and you may see that in this presentation. But we're essentially talking about that group, right? That was not the HRPP staff, but the wider group. So the board reviews greater than minimal risk research. Dr. Marin, when you see that phrase, what are the first things that come to your mind?
Well, you might have examples like a high risk intervention, uh, things that could have sensitive, vulnerable populations that could include children, prisoners, uh, race, pregnancy, also greater psychological or privacy risk. So by participating in the study, it's more than minimal risk because it presents a greater psychological issue for the participant or has some risk of having their privacy or some part of uh, their life that they don't wish to necessarily be out about, and that can present. And then, if there's some real in-depth ethical discussion needed on that, the more complicated ethical questions of what we're studying. So it really it is elevated, as Chad already said. The minimal risk talks about if you didn't participate in the study, it would not uh, make any you would not be impacted either way, or if you would participated. But by being higher than minimal risk, it could be impactful on one of these ideas that I just threw out.
Yeah, so again, just to reiterate, the staff members can review minimal risk studies,
Mhm.
and we, of course, get those through much quicker. The full board comes in when we elevate above minimal risk. So we talked about two things there, Joe, right? The vulnerable populations and the
Yes,
sensitive populations. And
right.
it's good to differentiate between those. Vulnerable, according to federal policy, of course, is some pregnant people, prisoners, and children. Um, and when I say some pregnant people, it would depend on what you're asking that pregnant person to do that would
And
make it higher risk or not. And then, of course, there's the sensitive topics that can make possibly the study greater than minimal risk due to the consequences for the participants. And that can sometimes not fall strictly under those basic categories, but more the cultural categories of race, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, and things like that. So, worth thinking about, especially if you're on a timeline, right? With your program and how long you can be in the IRB review process. Dr. Tribble, anything coming in?
Nope, nothing so far.
and we're going to get into what Dr. Becker was just referring to a little later in the presentation on the timeline and that. But I also
Yes,
want to
we'll.
note that when Dr. Becker was discussing the HRPP, not versus the IRB, but the different components, and he let us know that both he and Dr. Tribble are really a part of the HRPP part in the educational. They do a tremendous job of helping students or investigators, if they're faculty, see what may be beyond minimal risk. There's, as Dr. Becker said, Dr. Tribble holds open office hours. And a lot of time, these are the discussions, what am I dealing with a sensitive population? Am I dealing with a high risk intervention? And I think they do a tremendous job of working with the investigators so that even before they get to the IRB board, the IRB itself, we have a good idea whether that's going to be more than minimal risk.
And true that we often will help people realize that their study is likely to be greater than minimal risk, and then they change it so that it's not, right? And so at least knowing ahead of time can help you with your decision making. We're not trying to, convince you not to do a greater than minimal risk study. Yeah, Dr. Trumbull.
I was just gonna, yeah, thanks, Joe, for those nice words. But also, I was gonna just mention that I am seeing more and more students that are coming in with questions very early in the process. Yeah, when I first started working here, students would basically be taking the IRB course, and they would be like, and we would start to talk about the nature of their research and how it's going to be really difficult for it to get done in a 12-week time period or whatever. But I'm glad to see that a lot of chairs are starting to steer their students earlier. Chairs or even just professors who find out, early on what this student is interested and passionate about, and they go, just a thought, you might want to set up an office hour to make sure that this is something that can be, is actually feasible. And man, it's a weight off of their shoulders because they start to see, oh, okay, yes, I'm glad I didn't go down this road and create a 3-chapter proposal only to be told that it's going to take you, a year and a half to get enough people for this or what have you, or you're trying to access a population that's just not going to respond or anything like that. So anyway, I'm just very gratified to see more and more people coming earlier in the process.
That's great news to hear. All right. Well, we're going to move on to our next topic. And remember, just to use that Q&A, we can always flip back a few pages and answer any questions that come in if you're thinking of one now and you don't get it in time. But we're going to move to our next kind of topic, which is, again, the role of the IRB board, full board. And this one in particular, the board provides an independent ethical review. So, Dr. Marin, let us know some thoughts
So
about this.
the IRB board itself is responsible really for evaluating whether the risks are minimized, the risks are reasonable in relation to the benefits of the study, that the participant protections are adequate, that the informed consent is appropriate, and that whether additional safeguards are needed for vulnerable populations. So that, again, we're at the above minimal risk. We want to take a look at all of that. And we want it to be an independent ethical review, which I think as Chad goes to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit more about that and how that comes about.
That's great. It's a great introduction to it because it's important to understand that we are not working for, I mean, we're paid by the institution, but we are not working for the institution. We are essentially working as an independent ethical review board that's charged as such by the federal policy. So we do not uh, we do not relax our standards for anything. Okay, so it's the federal standards that we're following, and sometimes those may kind of come up against what people want to do at the university, and we have to help them negotiate that. It's not always that you can't do it; it's just that you might have to tweak your study a little bit to make it doable or feasible, of course, which is what we're going to talk about a little bit later in our presentation. So, um, moving forward then, because we have a few of these slides we want to get through. We're about halfway through our hour, and I just want to make sure we have time. We're
So
moving away from the role of the board to why the board must be diverse and include representation from across the institution. And
So as Dr. Becker
yeah,
has alluded to a couple times, our regulations really come from Washington and the national, they are national regulations that are required, federal regulations,
I'm sorry.
excuse me. And they actually require diverse membership backgrounds and perspectives. What we're really trying to do is avoid any ethical review have only looking through kind of one discipline or one list. If we are all the same, I see a couple of IRB colleagues on here, and they're a good example. I'm much more an educator in my discipline, and we have members of the board that are much more scientists. So we try to not look through that one lens. And that really helps us assure, and also by being diverse and having multiple things, that we really have expertise across the board in different disciplines. We have people putting in studies from the College of Education, from the College of Health Sciences, from the business school. We all of those areas, and we need some diverse expertise. So when the full board meets, we look to the person who may have that expertise, that discipline. If it's coming out of the health sciences area, our IRB board member who is health sciences may be able to speak to that more and assist the other board members in understanding fully the study. So, and as again, it's required by federal regulations. As we go to the next slide, it gets pretty specific. We have to have scientific and non-scientific members. We also have to have community members. So we have to have at least one or two community members that are a part of, and we've been super fortunate at National University that we have some, in some cases, retired professors, administrators, who then are back in the community and they're able to have their expertise on the board. And it's been a great thing for us to have that. So we we might need expertise also to be diverse in different studies in the areas like methodology or clinical practice, cultural considerations. The more diverse we can be, the more we can understand different cultural consideration. Vulnerable populations. I mean, we're not all experts on specific vulnerable populations. So, and also data and privacy issues. So we try to make that board really as diverse as we can. We have representation from the entire university across all the colleges and schools, and also a mix of scientists and non-scientists and community members. So it ends up being extremely diverse and extremely helpful when we look at these studies.
And I'm putting you on the spot, Dr. Marin, and I apologize. How many IRB board members do we have?
Okay.
I have a number in my head, but I did not count before we came.
I didn't
So I
count
apologize.
either. I'm gonna say that when the full board convenes, we have 10.
I was going to say a little bit more than that. So
Okay.
we cover our ground, and just as a note, so when the full board does meet, the HRPP staff, who is the directors, the analysts, and the educational analysts, we don't vote in full board situation. So the board makes the decision. We inform. We're there as sort of expert witnesses, if you will, and they ask us many questions because we've looked at the study, often in the group, scenarios or the office hours. We've talked with people. We've seen the application, right? Because it's been elevated from a minimal risk study to a full board study, so everybody gets to take a look at it. And we can inform the decision of the full board. But because the board is constituted this way, it's a collective decision, and it's a decision based on merit, on ultimately on rationality, and in some situation science. So very interesting when we bring in community and unaffiliated representation, because that means we have a unique study that we may not have seen before. So we always kind of in the HRPP and on the board, we always like it when there's a moment where we get to learn something too from an outside expert who may, have something to do with law enforcement or might have something to do
Mhm.
with clinical practice that goes beyond
Right.
what our regular board members, are familiar with. So, how's our Q&A
And
doing,
and
Kelly? Are we?
and Dr. Becker asked me to speak a little bit stories, a little anecdotal. I can tell you over the last 10 years, um, there have been studies that we've needed each of those individual uh, experts that we are fortunate enough to have on the board because a study has come across that was exceptionally clinical, or a study has come across that really had some cultural questions, and the expertise is passed around is the only way I can say. And our board members have stepped up and led that actual review for the other board members, which is a very good way to do this. And on the question of how many, I really should have known that because before every meeting of the full board, I have to make sure I know if we're going to have a quorum
Yeah,
so that
or
we can vote. So,
All right, we're both going to check that out this week.
yes.
And it is true that when we reach that point, it becomes very interesting for the board, and we try to work as hard as we can. Usually, it takes 2 or 3 weeks. For the board meets once a month, so depending on when your application might be pushed to the full board, it can take time. So here's the reason. Here are some of the reasons why. So we just want people informed about that. Dr. Tribble, anything going on in the Q&A?
Nope, we are empty so far.
Okay. Moving forward, then, we are conferring with outside experts. So I guess we've kind of referred to that, um, and that's kind of our outside members, our community members, and we do bring people in for disciplinary reasons as well. If we don't have people on the board who we feel have the disciplinary knowledge to help with a study. Not that we're getting into methodology necessarily, unless it brings risks itself, but is this potentially risky study based upon good research that's come before it? So that's why, right, we would bring in this type of outside expert. So that slide was a little bit of a continuation of the previous slide, so we're going to move forward here quickly, unless Joe, you have any.
Well, the only thing I would say there is we don't do that often because I just bragged a minute ago about the diversity of the board and hopefully the expertise, but we have needed it. And some examples that come to mind. We had a study a number of years back involving incarcerated prisoners, and we did use a consultant so that we would fully understand that. The other uh, study, and it was a number of years ago, where we were looking at Native American and tribal issues, and we uh, sought the assistance of uh, uh, we're here in San Diego, and we have local tribes and surrounding us. So those are the two that immediately come to mind. And we didn't really feel on our exact board, as diverse as it was, that we had the expertise necessary in those two areas.
Mhm.
And so we went with the outside consultants.
And this is not only to help you understand the work that happens, but what needs to go on in a full board review, so that if you are anticipating having a study that will be greater than minimal risk, that you're walking into it with your eyes wide open. These aren't impossible. We've certainly had many done. So I don't, again, mean to discourage anyone, but it is good to know, especially, and this is always a caveat for our IRB because we see so much student work come through, but not exclusively, especially if you're a student who has time constraints and programmatic constraints. You want to make sure that you're not adding too much time to your study. And we know that working with or prisoners or incarcerated individuals just takes more time. it might be completely doable, but you're going to have to get several permissions and things like that. Well, we'll go through a little bit more of that in our feasibility slides for the last half of our presentation. But just as a review of the HRPP and the IRB, they're not interchangeable. So, Dr. Marin, any thoughts about that?
I think we've covered it pretty well. Uh, and just to go over some of the key points, not every study is going to need full board review, but every study involving human participants require some oversight, ethical oversight. So if it is human subject research, it is required an IRB review. And again, I think the other point that we've tried to make is how multidisciplinary we try to have all aspects of both the HRPP program and the IRB board itself here at National.
Yep, absolutely. And if you do have a study that does not involve human subjects research, but you are going to be working under the auspices of NU as a student, professor, or staff member, you still have to submit that to the IRB so
Correct.
that we can
Yes.
determine that it's not human subjects research. So just as a note, uh, the reviews, that take time, of course, are the ones that involve humans. If we see that you're just pulling some data that's already been gathered by somebody else or from the government, we just need to see that that's what you're doing, and then we can quickly give you an approval. So those kinds of studies where you're using archival or existing data can get approved within days because the application is much shorter and much less information is needed. When you start working with human subjects, that's where it gets a little more complicated. And then when you invite that risk or sensitivity into the study, that's when it can rise to the full board status. And the HRPP staff helps determine all of that. Uh, so that if it does go to the full board, they are ready and raring to go to give an informed decision about the study. And we have asked people to change their studies a little bit at the full board. Rarely will we say absolutely no, not even close. We're never
Correct.
going to approve a study like this. It's more, hey, tweak it here, tweak it there, get this permission, make sure that you're talking to the right people, and then we can be assured that there are protections in place for the risks that are presented. So, again, not to discourage a greater than minimal risk study, but just to inform.
Yeah, Chad, I think that's a great point. I mean, in all of the full board reviews we've done over the years, um, I think at the absolute most, maybe one or two, we just said unequivocally no, and there's no way to change that. And in fact, all of the others, we worked, uh, we worked with the investigator. Um, I guess what you just alluded to, help them tweak it a bit
Mhm.
that didn't take away the risk, but minimize the risk somewhat.
That's
And
right.
I think we've done a very good job over the years of doing that. I literally am trying to think back at excuse me, but it's a decade I'm trying to think of, and I think perhaps one or two
Mhm.
received a flat out no. It was just too dangerous what they were proposing. But the rest we were able, even when it went to the full board, we were able to tweak it and figure out a way so that they could do the essence of their study.
Right. Not change the purpose, not change,
Right.
the research questions,
Mhm.
but just change how they're going about doing it. Yeah.
And not to overemphasize, but a lot of that came about because of an expertise of one or more of the IRB board members. So if it was a heavy clinical study, the clinician on the board was able to help us
Hmm.
figure out how we can tweak that.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of leads into our current slide that I have up right now, which is that the IRB chair is right not a gatekeeper. That's important. A lot of people see IRB as a gatekeeper. That we sit here fiendishly waiting for your bad study to come in and say, no, off the desk. This is not who we are. We consider ourselves first to be educational, second to be regulatorily compliant, and third to be diverse and full as needed. So, Joe, as I steal some of your thunder, I'll give the slide back to you for your duties and the notion of not being a gatekeeper. And we're doing okay. We've got about 15 minutes,
Okay.
so we'll jump into the feasibility issues right after
Yeah,
this.
this, my role, I really try to guide the IRB through the ethical review and their decision making when we do hold actual board meetings. As I said, I have to count heads and make sure we have quorum, and I have to kind of lead us through the review. Um, I work very closely with the IRB staff. Uh, I'm always consulted on any complex reviews. Things are run by me, what we're thinking. Uh, are we thinking of taking this to full board? Uh, are we comfortable that there's minimal risk? And the relationship there has been fantastic with the IRB staff and the role that the IRB chair plays. So a lot of that. I kind of serve as a liaison to the broader university community. I'm not the research gatekeeper uh, uh, I speak on behalf of the IRB. Faculty and staff do consult with me. I talked about Dr. Becker and Dr. Tribble helping investigators get a jump start. Sometimes we have folks in the university that want even more of a little jump start and just want to chat with me about IRB and what I will see, what I think this will lead to, and that's a very nice role to have. We're not really, as I said, I'm very proud of the fact that as we talked about uh, the studies that are greater than minimal risk, I was able to tell you that very, very, very few were outright rejected. And because we're not really here to stop research, we're going to question some things, but we're not here. Um, we really feel that, and again, back to Dr. Becker, Dr. Tribble, at times myself and the other professional staff, we're really here to try and help strengthen the studies rather than inhibiting them. So
Yeah.
that's kind of more or less the role
And
of the chair.
something we haven't mentioned and something that I didn't put in my notes for the presentation either is that when we do have a study go to the full board, we often have Dr. Marin go through the study with a fine-tooth comb and give a presentation to the board about it. So Dr. Marin will spend hours with full board studies as well to prepare for that and lead that meeting with the full board. And we always appreciate the effort that Dr. Marin puts in and the expertise that he brings. So let's move in.
That's just a matter of being old and doing this for a long time.
Right. So I am going to skip us ahead a little bit, Dr. Marin, because we have, I think we're going to repeat a
No, I
little bit
think that's great.
over those next few slides. So
Yeah, I think
um,
that's great.
the uh, the feasibility before we run out of time, we'll spend about a minute or two on each of these slides. This is more, can you do your study, right? So feasibility is it possible? Or is it feasible? And we have tools on our website. We have a feasibility check tool that will help you ask questions of your study to determine whether or not this is a reasonable study to one do at all or do within any constraints that you have. So we need to make sure that we go through some of this stuff because this is some of the very stuff that we talk to researchers about as they come to our program. Can you, because you don't want to, as Dr. Tribble said, you don't want to get too far down a path and right to see that you have to go back and go in a different direction. So keeping yourself informed about your choices and how those are implicated with the IRB is as easy as reaching out to us through email or signing up for an office hour. And it's not just interesting, but it has to be doable, obviously. So that's what that first phrase is. And then, what are some common feasibility questions that researchers should ask themselves, Dr. Marin,
Well,
about
I love the
access?
top of the slide because it says reality check, right?
Reality check.
Right. All right. So we often see the IRB. Someone wants to do a multi-site, nationwide, mixed methods study with vulnerable populations, right? And they require much more time, resources. That's what I mean. We're asking you to take a reality check. Um, we often see where do you actually have access to the population you want to study? And then who controls the access to the participants? For every study that we look at, you have to understand who controls that. We often have I don't want to pick on educators, but it's my field. Say, I'm I want to study such and such, and I have that at my school, right? So I can get that at my school. Um, Regulations prevent, you're not the owner of that data at that school. Because you happen to teach eighth grade there, you're not the owner of that data. In fact, it even gets into the school district gets into site permission and that's a very, very common reality that students face. Uh, Thinking back again, storytelling a little bit. Person in HR assumed they wanted to do a study about essentially climbing the ladder and in the company they were with, and it was a very big company, and they thought they would have plenty of participants. The CEO of the company uh, put a complete stop to it. They didn't want to know, they didn't want that study, the data about that. So they were not able to get permission. And that was a case where we had to really go in a completely different direction. And that, there's the matter of data. I had a personal dissertation student that wanted to study training procedures and the effectiveness of them at a certain very Fortune 500 major company. And again, there would have been incredible data there to complete the study and was told completely no. So we had to take that in a different direction. So you have to do that reality check, also the timeline. Will you be able to get that? Will you get the population? We've had people very surprised by that. Of course, they assume, even if they get permission, that all of the second grade teachers in the school district are going to answer the survey that they get, and they get extremely minimal return on that. So they weren't realistic about the response rate that they're going to get from their participants. So
That is
again,
another, yeah.
feasibility is tremendously about a reality check, recruitment delays, low response rates. the time it will take to do data analysis, all that has to be factored in.
That's absolutely right. So let's take a look at these last handful of slides, which will give us a little bit more info about each of the things that Dr. Marin has mentioned. So the timeline, can you realistically complete your study within, and I have program timeline because we're not all of our PIs, our primary investigators aren't students, right? So, but you may have a timeline as a faculty member or a staff member. Maybe you have a publication timeline. Maybe you're looking to submit something to a conference. Maybe your yearly review is coming up and you're looking to complete something by the end of that review period. So making sure that you are understanding what's required for your study. If you're going to be doing a study with incarcerated individuals, it's going to take longer because you're going to have to go work through the DOD to, get permissions and then also the full board. If you're going to be working with 17-year-olds, depending on the sensitivity of the topics or what you're having them do, you may have to get permission from several places, not just their parents, right? So any study with a 17-year-old or younger needs parental permission. We're not going to go into some of the exceptions, but generally, if you're working with minors, you'll need to go through the parents, which takes time. You have to recruit them, you have to get their permission, and then you have to recruit the minors and then get minor assent. So that's 4 steps that maybe someone else only has 1 step to take that place because they're working with adults. So some of these are really important. The scope creep, keep focus, right? So not too, Dr. Marin's first comments, not too many methods, not too many populations, or that, what was the other one, Joe? Joe, not too many
Not too many variables,
variables or research
not and
questions,
flat
right?
out not too many research
Not
questions.
too many research questions. Just try to keep it simpler. Again, this might be a comment that's directed more toward our student population. If you have time as a faculty or staff member for a complicated study, you want to make sure you're not creeping too far or your study won't be narrow enough to really be valuable. The broader studies can sometimes not really provide much useful data. So it's always good for researchers to keep focus, but especially for student researchers who sometimes feel like they can answer a lot of questions with one study. Instead of thinking that as, say, more of an agenda of research that you would do over several studies. So, and then as Dr. Joe had mentioned, who's going to say yes to participating in your study? Talk a little bit more about this, Dr. Joe.
Well, Chad and I bounce these off each other, so he's giving me a little too much credit here. But we started talking about who's really going to say yes, and I did have some anecdotal stories that prove that, which I've already shared. What about if you're studying executives? The higher up they are in their career, um, I think the less likely you're going to get an answer. Dr. Becker already alluded to incarcerated populations. We have been able to pull off those studies in the past, but it was easily a 6 month project just to get all the site permissions, all the things that are needed. Studying physicians, they're very busy and not likely. Think about, and many studies want to go down this road, trauma survivors. How likely are they to really say yes if you're studying specifically the trauma that happened to them? So law enforcement, very difficult. Minors, we already talked about. The story I used before, employees with the organization, and it was shut down by HR and the CEO. Um, and so those are some of the categories that just think about. Not saying it's not possible, but circle it back to what we were talking about. What's the realistic timeline for all of those type studies if they are possible.
And I think when you think about those elements, you can, as Dr. Merritt was saying, you can do studies like these. They're just going to take longer, and you don't have to wait. So you can feel things out, right? I think some people don't realize that they could say, "Hey, do you think a study like this would work at your school, or do you think I could get permission from this site if I did a study like this?" You can kind of reach out to potential permission givers without doing your whole proposal first, and then going to them with this thing and having them say no. So if you have questions about that, reach out to us ahead of time so that we can help guide you. I do want to just pop to our
Dr.
last
Becker,
slide.
Dr.
Uh,
Becker, I hate to step on you, but I've got to say, like, I'm going to triple emphasize that
yeah.
to reach out to Dr. Becker and Dr. Tribble. And the two stories I told earlier um, about the corporate and not being able to get that completed, both of them completely did uh, their proposal, chapters 1 through 3,
Right.
tied up in a knot. And it was when they went through the IRB that it was completely cut off at the pass. So
Right.
use our expertise of our staff to prevent that from happening is the best advice I can give.
We appreciate that because that is why we're here. So I've switched to our last slide here, which has some contact information for everybody in case you have to go. You can email us at this email address. Of course, that's our home HTTP address, and I will be posting this slide deck to our website. If you have to run, thanks so much for coming. We are going to stick on for just a few more minutes because we just have a few more slides. So let's pop back to uh, uh, this one here, methodology on paper, not always the best methodology for your situation. So talk just a little bit about that, Joe, and we'll spend about a minute on each of these next couple slides.
Uh, as you look at a methodology, it may look good to you on paper, but you have to step back and really say, what what am I trying to study? How am I trying to do it? And see if that is really going to fit your study. Um, we often have this, and come in. I'm going to do mixed methods. I'm going to do a heavy uh, quantitative study, and we have the ability to have outstanding qualitative studies take place, literature review take place, case studies take place. So really try to analyze exactly what will be the best methodology for your situation. And again, it goes back, what's it going to take to do that study with the methodology that you're presenting?
And sometimes the methodology brings risk in, right? So if you want
Mhm.
to give an anonymous survey, that would be less risky than doing a in-person or on Zoom interview with
Right.
someone who maybe was talking about a sensitive topic or was a vulnerable population. So thinking about what's feasible when it comes to methodology. Not we're not going to say, oh, you're not going to be able to answer those research questions. That's not our job. That's your job as a researcher, your job as a faculty sponsor or chair to help your students understand that. But for us, we have to look out for risks. So when the methodology is risky or too much, sometimes we will say, hey, take a look at that. Remember that the more sensitive the topic, the more information the IRB needs. This is pretty self-explanatory, but if you're doing like I said earlier, a study with children, you're going to potentially need parental recruitment materials, parental permission, recruitment materials for the minor, and then assent. Yeah, Kelly, do you have a
Yeah, just a question that came in that from on the Q&A from Arun Kasala.
Okay.
He basically says he's doing a proof of concept, constructive research, which involves simulations of data and logs using computer systems. And he was wondering if that needed to go through IRB. And my understanding is any project they're doing, especially for a dissertation, should come through the IRB and for us to make the determination if it's either not research or not human subjects. Is that
That's
correct?
right.
Right.
Yes, one of our categories is not human subjects research, and we approve those very quickly. So we will need to see that. As part of your program, you will need a determination from us in order to put that in the doctoral record, typically, depending on your program. But yes, that is a university requirement that any research that's being done under the auspices of students, faculty, or staff does need to be submitted. Your application will be short, and you will provide us with where you're getting that data from, and that'll pretty much be it, as long as it's either publicly available or you have permission. So those would be the two things to think about for that type of study. So hopefully that helps answer that question. And then really our last is design the study that you can successfully complete. Okay. Uh, all the different things that we have talked about up to this point can contribute to a study stalling or failing. And we want to make sure that you're thinking about what's the context. Is this for a degree program? Is this for, a faculty member? Is this for a staff member who's working with other staff members as part of, say, QA, QI effort or something like that? Thinking about, can you actually do it? So we find a lot of people, even our staff and even our faculty, who come to us with studies that are either too big or too broad, and they need to be narrowed. And that's one of the things that we can help to do, but it's also the responsibility of the researcher to understand what studies have come before that are successful because you've done a good literature review, and then shape your study in a similar way so that you can contribute to that larger conversation, without over, kind of spreading yourself too thin over too many people or too many other components of research. All right. I'd love to thank everybody who stayed the extra few minutes for our conversation. Again, you can always reach out to us and email. Within 24 hours, you'll get a response. That's how our email works. If it's maybe you need to go to office hours to talk to Dr. Tribble, then you have to, go sign up to talk to Dr. Tribble. But typically, our email staff are able to answer pretty complicated questions and help direct you toward the resources that we have to help you with what it is that you're stuck with. And of course, you can register for any of our services and office hours from our website. So let me just thank our chair, Dr. Joe Marin, for being willing to share his insights and help us really gain an understanding of the context of the IRB within the larger HRPP, to provide examples and to talk through some of these issues with us. So thanks, Joe.
My pleasure, and thank you to both Dr. Becker and Dr. Tribble and everybody who took the time to participate today. Much appreciation.
And also thanks, Dr. Tribble, for working our Q&A
Yeah.
and for letting people into the room. Can't do it without you, Kelly.
Thanks.
And you'll see that Dr. Tribble and I team up on webinars all the time. Dr. Marin will likely not be in our next one. But we do hope to have him back for future presentations. So thanks, everyone. Again, sorry we went a little over, and I will have these resources available to you in the next 24 hours on our website if you want to share them or look at them again. Hope everyone has a great day, and please come back to take a look at some of our resources and services. Take care.
Take care.
I've captured everything, Chad.
I appreciate it. I'm going
Yep.
to end the meeting now. Thanks.
All right.